once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. An old friend is our guest author, Janet Morana. Shockwaves, Abortion's Wider Circle of Victims, published by Catholic Book Publishing Company, of course available through our EWTN religious catalog. Janet, great to have you here. Of course, people see you all the time, associate you with the pro-life movement. Priest for Life, obviously, for many, many years, continued there, as well as with the Catholic View for Women.
That's right.
With Teresa Tomeo and Elena Rodriguez, of course, as is the new team, and so you're seen on that as well. But a lot of people do think of you in terms of, the whole pro-life movement, so it kind of fits that you write a book having to do with Shockwaves, Abortion's Wider Circle of Victims. Now, your original book was Recall Abortion.
Right.
So what's Shockwaves? What's this about? What's different?
What's different is in Recall Abortion, I focused in on abortion as a bad product that failed women. And the focus of that book was the damage abortion does to women. What this book does is it takes the fact that at the epicenter is the death of a baby and what happens and who's affected. Of course, everyone thinks right away of the mother, but then what about the father? What about grandparents? Especially the grandparents.
And that's what you cover in the book.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All these other people groups. So the shockwave reverberates out, and it even affects future siblings, friends. What about the friend who gave their friend the money for the abortion, or took them for the abortion, or said nothing? Their roommate was going off to have an abortion. They said nothing to say you shouldn't do that. So everyone is affected in one way or another.
It's interesting because years ago when I first kind of realized what was going on and got my pro-life act together, so to speak, post marriage encounter in Cursillo, I heard one gentleman give a talk, and he said why there's such a silence in the church is because many times when you're talking out there, those people are sitting out there.
That's right.
At all various levels of involvement.
Right. But see, silence doesn't help.
Right.
And we know that from the testimonies that we have now of the mothers, the fathers, the grandparents who are coming forward and after healing give their testimony. And what they're saying is that silence in the church made them think sometimes there was no hope for me. It was the unforgivable sin, But now I think that the clergy are learning, I think through Rachel's Vineyard and Selena Moore, that you can speak about abortion, but with compassion.
Right.
In other words, we're going to condemn the act, but not the people who maybe went off and did it.
One of the things that struck me out of reading the book was the idea of fighting against this hypocrisy charge that happens. And it's because people say, I did this thing, I made a mistake, I'm telling you about it because I don't want you to make the same mistake. And the charge comes, oh, well, that's, you're preaching to me when you did all these bad things yourself. Where do you get this high road to talk to me about how my life should be?
Yeah. Well, I think what happens is, especially with the women, when they go through that healing, they want to kind of pay back to God in a certain way. And they say, you know what, if I could stop one person from having an abortion by listening to my story, it saved one baby, then it's worth it. And that's what I think with Silent No More, what encourages them to speak out. And I think they also speak out because they want to reach the people out there that think, oh, well, abortion doesn't affect me. I don't care if you have one or don't have one. But, they want to get the people out of the mushy middle to say, listen what it does. You know it's killing a baby. Look what it's doing to the women. Because most people who want to hold on to abortion say, oh, but the women need to have abortion. They need to keep it legal for them. What these women do when they speak out is to say, no, it doesn't solve the problem. Look at all the problems it creates,
Right. It seems that many times some of the loudest voices, even though you talk about the lost fatherhood here, a lot of times people there sitting and promoting abortion are men.
Right.
Because it also comes in very handy, quite honestly, in having a bravura sex adventure life without any responsibility.
Well, sure, there's no responsibility.
Right,
exactly. No accountability. They can just say, well, I'm out of here. Go take care of it, as a lot of guys
and actually say, well, you're free, and we're the same, so I don't have to even feel guilty about the fact that because there's really nothing holding us together, so to speak. Now, I mentioned Teresa Tomeo, your buddy there.
Right.
And she has a comment in the beginning of the book. She said, this book is not just for your friends, coworkers, and relatives who still consider themselves pro-choice. After all these years, do you still have friends and relatives who are pro-choice?
Yes, unfortunately, you do. For example, when I show up at family functions, especially now that all three of my daughters are married, all the in-laws and all that, they'll sometimes say, "Oh yeah, here comes Janet," and and they know don't bring up certain subjects because you know what you're going to hear from me, kind of thing. One of my daughters is married to a fella, lovely guy, Craig, and his whole family's up from New England, Massachusetts and Maine, and they are staunch people that would say, yes, abortion is okay, and yet they know what I do. And every so often, if the subject comes up, well, I'm going to speak up, but kindly, not in an argumentative way. Sometimes with people, if you can give them facts, you open their eyes a little bit. And I've been able to do that. One of the things I say to them sometimes is, do you realize that abortion happens through all 9 months of pregnancy? And then sometimes they step back and they say, really? I thought it was only, in the first trimester. I said, no. And I said, I can prove to you what states it's legal in, what abortion clinics are doing late-term abortion. And then they go, well, I'm not in favor of that. I said, well, then don't call yourself pro-choice, because you're not in favor of abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy.
Right, exactly.
So.
Now, in the introduction here, it is said, abortion is not a decision made in the privacy of a woman's mind, with her and her health care provider being the only players, which is what we hear, of course. No, like a pebble thrown in a lake that generates multiple far-reaching, long-lasting concentric waves. That's what we're talking about. The death, one small innocent child. This book is most necessary to help us confront reality and look with courage on the devastated landscape of our world. And that's where your imagery comes from.
Right, exactly.
Now, who are the Nays?
Okay, well, Dr. Philip Ney is a Canadian psychiatrist. He's now in his 80s, so he has been at this topic for about 4 or 5 decades. He's a child and family practitioner originally, but then discovered, in his practice, the devastation of abortion from the people coming for help.
Right.
And Father Frank and I actually got to know him quite well almost 20 years ago. We heard of him, and we traveled up to Canada, and I've studied under him. He's developed a whole abortion recovery program called Hope Alive, and I'm a certified counselor in that program.
Okay, so this is Marie Peters Ney. Is that his wife?
Yes, that's his wife.
Well, she makes that comment, and she also refers to, she said, one can analyze abortion from many different angles. She talks about the idea of temporary insanity or disassociation from reality.
Right, yeah.
Have you seen that with people?
Yeah, sometimes, yes, yeah. And she especially, her and Philip, because, like I said, they've been dealing with this all over the world, actually. Dr. Ney has traveled and trained people in this Hope Alive program all over the world. And matter of fact, I'm going to be hosting, they have an annual meeting of counselors that come together, and I'll be hosting that meeting sometime this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
She also talks about we're living in a society composed of survivors of parental homicides. That's part of an interesting way to think about it. And the only way to escape the horror of parents killing their children while in the womb is by disassociating from reality, escaping in the cyber world, using drugs, or allowing oneself to become like a zombie. We think about how The Walking Dead is so popular.
Yeah. Well, and when you think of, and that's what in the chapter in my book on siblings, where I cover that, that's what Maria is referring to, that the future siblings are dramatically affected by this abortion. Right.
Now, and then it moves into Dr. Ney itself, who talks about the fact that you're one of the sanest people he knows.
Right.
He makes that point. And he also mentions, and I noticed that in going through the book, he said in Chapter 4, Janet describes abortion, chemical, surgical, for what it really is.
Right.
You may want to skip this chapter. If it does not upset you, then something is very, very wrong with you. Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I gave Dr. Ney, obviously, the book to look at before it went to the publisher, because he's been like my mentor, so to speak, with all this. The deep psychological effects of abortion and all the people groups. It was really through Dr. Ney that I became aware of it. And also, at the same time, with Silent No More, first the women spoke out, then the men spoke out, but then other people groups started coming to us. And saying, well, we want to speak out too now after going through healing. So it was both the combination of Silent No More and Dr. Ney that really kind of brought it all together.
It all came together. Abortion has undermined the roots of the family as a consequence of feeling powerless to stop the murder of their innocent baby. Men leave their families, and many millions of father-neglected children grow up very angry at all father figures.
Right.
So we see that in society quite a bit.
Absolutely.
He sees that related to this. He also says, Janet gives good examples of post-abortion survivor syndrome, but nobody I know has plumbed the depths of this most destructive phenomenon like you have. So have you discovered new things as you spent more time looking at this?
Well, I wouldn't say so many new things, but it's kind of like the thing.
Maybe how broad it is?
Yes,
is
that's
that what
it.
It is? Okay.
Yeah, and so many more people affected. And I found, even since I've given my own testimony as a grandmother who lost a grandchild, one of my daughters did have an abortion, which I've spoken out publicly with her permission. once I gave my testimony for the first time, suddenly now other grandparents have been coming to me too, and saying me too. Right. And I think, in the pro-life movement especially, it's something that we think is never going to happen to us, because we've been educating our kids from when they're very small about how wrong abortion is, and we're very enmeshed in the pro-life movement. So you think it's never going to happen, and then suddenly it happens, and you step back and say, what didn't I do? Right. And when I asked my daughter, you knew you could have come to me. Why didn't you come to me? Well, she was away at school in Michigan, and she said, Mommy, I didn't want to disappoint you. Right. I said, disappoint me? Right. And so of course her and I both went through healing, actually with Dr. Nate. We went to Canada together, and we participated in the Hope Alive counseling and healing program.
Right. And this was another point that you make that he talks about, that you make in the book. Janet shows the depths of depravity occurring to once noble physicians and staff. Right. And we've seen that even last summer with the baby Alfie thing, where you start to wonder where is the thinking of the medical people about doing everything they can within reason to save a child, or at least open up an opportunity. If it's not costing them anything, then what's the issue? Is it a matter of pride, of who's in charge and who's in control?
I don't understand it. With the doctors, though, who have performed abortion, those people we've come in contact with.
And they're in the book, too.
They're in the book, too, yes. The ones who have converted, obviously. Right. And with all of them, it always happens to be a life-changing thing that wakes them up. Mm-hmm. Like with Dr. Levatino, it was the death of his own daughter being hit by a car that shook him. But because what Dr. Nate points out so aptly is that when someone kills a baby like that through abortion, the doctor, he's dehumanized the baby to be able to do that, but he's also dehumanizing himself. Part of himself is dying with him. Mm-hmm. Because after you do the first abortion, then you can do the second one and the third, and after, and then it just... and that's how they...
And that's what happens, whether it's Nazi Germany or anything else.
Right.
Once you start doing it,
it just...
What's the difference if you,
because you
killed 5 people, you killed 10 people. Once you've killed somebody, the next one, each one after that becomes easier and easier, because you have to rationalize it in such a way to say it's okay, otherwise you got to deal with the first act anyway.
Exactly.
I thought his line, what is the matter with everyone, particularly Christians? Is that the part that you find the most disturbing, in a sense, when you deal with people who are quote unquote, let alone Catholic, and seem to not have an issue with abortion?
Absolutely.
Or don't want to be troubled with it.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, Doug, that if everyone who professed belief in Jesus Christ wouldn't tolerate abortion, we'd be done, right? And that's not just Catholics. I'm talking about all the faiths, all the religions put together. Anyone who professes belief in Jesus, it'd be over. Right. Unfortunately and sadly, there are, Catholics too. I mean, there are so many Catholics. If we were to walk in, pick a parish here in Birmingham and go in on a Sunday and survey people, you're going to find, I would say, at least 25% of those people will claim to be pro-choice, or we should keep abortion legal. And that's sad. So sad. When you know,
you see that as a confusion on the social justice side of understanding sometimes in the church of kind of they conflate it with helping the poor.
Right, immigration and this and that. I think so, but I just sometimes think that so many people are just caught up in the society of now that abortion is no big deal. They think it's no big deal.
It's legal, it's
It's legal, it's okay, kind of thing.
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it, but
I don't want to stop anybody else
exactly.
from doing it. Right.
So that they feel somehow they can claim to be pro-choice.
You also sense sometimes with, and certainly I would say sometimes with the age bracket I see, which many times surprisingly can be older women, that it's kind of a leftover thing to the whole feminist movement.
Yes, absolutely.
Women's liberation.
Yeah, and again, with the people that support abortion, like I said, Catholics, I think they think we need to keep abortion legal because we're helping women. Because they always throw up at us, well, what about the woman who was raped? What about the life of the mother? All the hard cases are the first thing those kind of people throw in your face. And of course, I can go one by one, write down how it's never good.
And we don't certainly think that should be legal either, but if we have to let's start there and say those are the only cases that can be legal. Can you live with that?
Right.
And you'd find out they probably quickly say, well, no, it's well, there's other cases too. Right. You say in the beginning, abortion, no big deal. Not.
Right.
First, let's discuss the claim that abortion is safer than childbirth, which interestingly is still a favorite mantra of the pro-abortion community. And that's what I like in your book too. You kind of take some of these canards that we hear all the time and knock them down.
Exactly.
Is that true then? I'm assuming it's not.
Well, first of all, what abortion does to the women, the physical damage, it's far greater. And the other big lie that they get out there is that, if we don't have illegal abortion, we're going to have the back alley abortions, And the really only difference between back alley and what's going on today is they took the shingle off the back door and put it on the front door. The conditions, as we know from the Gosnell case, and he wasn't the only butcher out there that had a clinic like that. And the conditions are terrible. It's a major. When you think about it, an abortion is major surgery on the woman, and yet no good practices are done in an abortion clinic. Think about what operation, Doug, have you ever had, if you've had surgery, where you met the doctor on the operating table for the first time?
Right,
You didn't even know his name. He didn't even look at you. I mean, the stories that you can read from the testimonies of the women is horrific. And some of these abortion doctors are even insulting to the women. And some of these women claim, I've changed my mind. I don't want to have this abortion.
Right.
And yet they hold them down. They continue to do that. So
they're not going to get paid if they don't. Right?
Exactly.
Obviously. And you talk about it, obviously, on your Silent No More website, silentnomore.com, that you have testimonies from thousands of women who obviously regret their abortion. You say, in throwing out the requirement for abortionists to have hospital admitting privileges, which is exactly what you're talking about, Supreme Court, in effect, is helping the worst abortion providers stay in business. So that's exactly what you're saying.
Exactly.
Okay, we don't agree with it, but if you're going to do it, you should at least have the ability to have it like any other medical facility that's piercing people's hate. You can go, you have to get somebody's permission to get your ears pierced.
Right.
Leave school to get your ears pierced, but you can go get an abortion.
You can't even give a student an aspirin or a Tylenol in school without a permission. Yet that council will take your daughter off for an abortion without you knowing.
Now, you got involved with the pro-life movement officially more in like June of 2000, kind of is that around when did you walk away from actually teaching?
I left teaching in June of 2000.
Okay.
June 28th, 2000.
That's when you decided.
Yeah.
Well, what was the thing that put you over the top for that?
Well, basically, at that point, I was helping Priests for Life and Father Pavone on a volunteer basis. Actually, their entire resource department was being run out of my basement. And I had volunteers coming, and it just I couldn't live in both worlds, in the teaching world. Believe me, Doug, I love teaching. I was winning grants and stuff for my district, and people actually when I announced that I was going to leave teaching.
Right, you say that in the
my
book.
colleagues were
What
shocked.
are you crazy? What are you doing?
Nuts?
What are you doing?
And I had just.
As a friend said to me, can't you do this on the weekend?
And I had just, ironically, graduated that May with a second master's to be a reading specialist, and then in June left. So the whole thing didn't add up to people. And I said to them at the little closing luncheon they gave me that I was leaving teaching to give them job security. I said, because if we keep aborting our children, the class size will go down and some of you will lose your jobs,
Right.
So... I just couldn't do both things. It was just getting too much. And my heart, I remember the day I made the decision to leave teaching. Because up till then, I had, of course, gone from spiritual direction and talked to my family and was tossed. But when I made that decision, I knew it was the right decision because a peace came over me, like they described, a real peaceful feeling that I know this is right.
This is the right thing to do.
This is the right thing to do. Yeah. And so now one of my daughters became a teacher, so she followed in my footsteps.
So I'm assuming you've never looked back, as they say.
No,
okay.
No.
In 2002, I developed and co-founded with Georgette Forney, president of Anglicans for Life, the Silent No More Awareness Campaign. And let me ask you a question, because that's one of the things, Anglicans for Life, Episcopals for Life, or whatever, with that, that's not the majority opinion in most of that denomination, things like that. So how, as kind of disappointed as you might be at sometimes on the Catholic response, she must be devastated on the other side.
Well, and that's really why they founded Anglicans for Life, is to have this pro-life presence within the denomination. And they are growing. I mean, even now when we go to the March for Life up in Canada, there's a big contingent of the Anglicans for Life that march there, just like they do in D.C. So I think Georgette's done a terrific job. As she also, had an abortion herself. So as a woman who's had an abortion, her energy, her compassion comes through, and I think she's done a wonderful job in expanding. Since 2002 to now, Anglicans for Life is really exploding.
Great.
Yeah.
Proponents of abortion often complain about the stigma that surrounds abortion, and they believe a greater affirmation and acceptance of abortion will remove the stigma. But the reality is that as we acknowledge and heal the impact abortion has on all those involved, we will finally dismantle the source of that stigma. Unresolved shame and grief, because they would say, well, the stigma is what you're putting on people. You're making people feel bad. That's why they feel bad, not that there's this intrinsic shame and guilt that comes with having an abortion?
I mean, the guilt with having an abortion is, and again, we know this from the testimonies, is you realize you've destroyed the life of that child. And so, the guilt is there no matter what.
Right.
You can't go away. And, even people, and this is where I think the anger comes when you're at those women's marches and you see the anger on their faces.
Right.
It's because a lot of them have had an abortion and they haven't been healed from that. And so there's this guilt, guilt mixed with anger.
Right.
And that's how it
Well,
comes
there's nothing
out.
that gets you more upset if you've got an open sore or wound for somebody to poke it.
And that's what,
Right.
and that's what it is.
And
It's
that's when
poking
people
at
get,
it.
right, exactly. You get angry. You say the physical, spiritual, emotional trauma the mother feels changes her and how she interacts in all her relationships, present and future. And that's as well what you think we're seeing in society.
Absolutely.
Lack of commitment, things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, women who have had an abortion very often, when they go off and marry and have their own children, they have difficulty bonding with those children because of, they realize, and even for men too, men who've lost fatherhood, in the past, when they go and finally marry someone now that want to be a dad, and people go, congratulations, this is your first kid. Well, guess what? It triggers something in their mind.
I never thought of that.
And lets them think back, like, hey, when I was in college, I got that girl pregnant, and yeah, she went off and had an abortion. I gave her the money. So all this guilt comes back to them then.
Right.
And it has to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with.
Well, they used to say, I know in a marriage encounter, buried. If you bury feelings, you bury them alive. They're not dead. They're just under the surface, and they still have an impact on you. In Death at the Epicenter, where you have in that chapter, you have some of those images, and you show the various. And what's interesting about them too is they seem very clinical. Was that on purpose, in the sense of how these images are?
Well, yeah, those images are from Nucleus Medical Media, which used to be called Nucleus Medical Arts, and they're a company that does medical diagrams for court cases. And so a number of years ago, apparently they created these, and through Priests for Life, basically, we've gotten permission. We have gotten these images out all over. They're on our website with, again, permission, and now I got them in the book, because it's not some sketch that the pro-life movement did, or that maybe Dr. Levatino, a former abortionist, said, oh, this is how you should draw it.
Right.
No, this was done by a company that did this for testimony in court cases. And so for me, that's the best thing to do is like taking something out of a medical textbook,
Right, and saying,
this is it.
Right, this is straightforward.
Straightforward.
You have a section in here, and you have it later about how abortion affects men, and fathers, why women abort, and there's 10 reasons you list here, 11 actually. So have they changed over the years? Because the number one, mother would kick her out of the home if she's too young to have a baby, that being one of the ones. And I just wonder, I mean, I could think like 30, 40 years ago maybe, there was this kind of stigma in that way of like, oh, this is a terrible thing, you've embarrassed the family, you can't do this. Now I would think in many cases that's not really a major concern for most people. You might disappoint your parents, but are you really at that level of condemnation in reality as opposed to maybe what you think in your head?
It still is.
Right.
It still is.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, it is, because there's an embarrassment from a lot of families that oh, my kid got pregnant, and in some cases they're getting pregnant younger and younger, as you know.
Well, that's probably what's driving it even more so too.
Exactly.
That you're not talking about girls who are 18 or 19.
Right. They're 14, 13, 15,
really,
and
people
it's
think
like
of,
and so it's still an embarrassment for people,
Right, and then also when you're dealing with that, you start to find out, well, who's impregnating these people and how old are they?
Well,
and why isn't that
being spoken?
They used to call statutory rape.
Yeah, and statutory rape, by the way, is supposed to be obligatory for an abortion clinic to report. They're supposed to be mandated reporters, and yet they don't. I mean, we have a lot of cases that we know about.
Right. Now you say in the section on Fatherhood Forever that many men describe abortion as the worst experiences of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yes, because, first of all, for men, there's two sides of the coin, all right? There's the guys who checked out and said, okay, you take care of it, here's the money, go have the abortion. But there are guys out there who said, no, don't kill our baby. We could do this together. And yet they have no right.
Right.
Roe v. Wade gives the men zero right, and she goes off and has that abortion anyway.
Right.
There's a lot of deep-seated anger in those men.
Right.
And matter of fact, Rachel's Vineyard is in a maximum security prison in Florida, and then these are men that are all in for life for murder. And the chaplain one day, knowing they were going to do this Rachel's Vineyard program, had a group of men, about 15 men that were in the chapel. And he said, handed out pieces of paper. He said, if you've had an abortion experience, just write yes, and if not, write no. And we'll pass a basket, fold it, put it in the basket, and he took it away. He looked at that. 12 of the 15 had an abortion experience. Right. So they brought in Rachel's Vineyard to this prison. And they started unpacking these feelings of anger. And of course, they went through this healing process. That the warden had gone away on vacation for a couple of weeks, comes back, and one of the worst prisoners, the angriest, this guy, like 6'5", was like changed. And the warden was asking the chaplain, what happened? He goes, well, we've started the healing program. And the warden said, well, let's continue this. And now some of that first group of prisoners are ministering to others.
Right, to diffuse the anger. Help to take them
exactly.
So
but it shows you how the anger, how deep-rooted and it is.
And you go on and you talk about grandparents, you talk about siblings, etc. You talk about people who feel bad because they couldn't stop it, etc. So it's all in here, all ripple effects, all shockwaves. Is there another book in the works?
Not yet, Doug.
Not yet, but maybe, okay.
You never know.
All right, Janet. Well, you're pretty busy. Janet Morana, thank you so much for joining us here on Bookmark. The book Shockwaves, Abortion's Wider Circle of Victims, and it's available through the EWTN Religious Catalog right now, published by Catholic Book Publishing Company. Check it out. Check us out next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark. We'll see you next time. Thanks.